Hey, my name is Josh, and today I'd like to tell you a little bit about what God's done in my life. When I was real small, I was about 7 years old, I accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as my personal Savior. I got baptized not long after, and did all the things when I was a kid. I went to kids' church, I did all the memorization, I did all the stuff, went to all the events, was part of it, and it was great. As I became a middle schooler, I continued on that path, kept doing the things, but I'm not really sure if it was me who was doing it or maybe if it was my parents. There wasn't a lot of a relationship with Jesus, but I was pretty consistent about going to church, and I really thought that was probably good enough. I'd say that I was going through the motions, but there was really not a lot that was there. So about 3 years after college, I just I drifted away. I made a decision that maybe I should just take a break. And it wasn't like a hard and fast thing. It was just I drifted away. I heard somebody recently talking about how when you don't tie up a ship, they just kind of drift away. And that's really what happened in my life. So I decided to take a break. And this break I'd really had in my head, I figured was probably going to be about 6 months. And it'd come back then after that. And 6 months actually turned out to be more like 8 years. And during that time, I very much drifted. I lived my own life. I was measuring myself against the world's standards. And according to the world's standards, I wasn't a bad person. I wasn't doing horrible things, but I didn't want anything to do with Jesus. I didn't want anything to do with God. I just wanted him to leave me alone, and in return, I was gonna leave him alone. But something happened that was kind of interesting, and that is that my dad had gone overseas on a mission trip, and my mom had decided to come visit me. And I was like, sweet, dude, the cooking around here is gonna get a whole lot better. So she had come over, and it was the week before Thanksgiving, and she had said that she wanted me to take her to church. Okay, now at this point, I hadn't been in a church in like years at this point. And but I was reasoning in my head. I said, this can go one of two different ways. I can say, no, I'm not going to church, and get my mom really mad at me. Or I could give up a couple hours and say, okay, Mom, I'll take you to church. So this was a pretty easy decision in self-preservation mode. So I said, Mom, I'll take you to church. What kind of church do you want to go to? And she came up with some name of some church. I don't remember what it was. And so we went to that church, and I had made a deal with her that if we went to church, we could go watch the movie in the afternoon, just kind of like a trade-off kind of thing. And so we showed up, and we're trying to go to an early service. And we get there, and there's like 5 cars in the parking lot. And we walk up, and we're going, hey, we're here for the church service that starts at this time. And they're like, normally we have that, but this is the week before Thanksgiving, and we're not doing that. We've only got one service, and it's not for 2 more hours. And so I kind of got a little nervous, and I said, I'm not waiting around. Mom, we're out of here. Let's go. So I kind of took her back to my car, and we drove off. And I said, well, we can't do that church, Mom. What's your backup church? And she said, well, what about this kind of church? So we looked up that kind of church. We drove over to there, and I'm not kidding you, the exact same thing happened. So at this point, I'm almost freaking out because I had signed up to go to one church for one service. I've now been to 2 churches and no service at all, and they want me to wait around. So I go back to the car with my mom, and I'm like, Mom, we can't do this. And she said, well, I'm out of ideas. Where do you think we should go to church? Now, again, I hadn't been to church in years, and I had no idea where to go. But I said, Mom, I've driven by this place, and they have a sign that faces the road. Maybe we should go to the place with the sign. And she said, perfect, let's go. So we drove to the place with the sign, and we pull up, and there's at least 10 cars in the parking lot. And I go, oh, here we go again. And these 2 ladies come up to the car, elderly ladies come up to the car, and they could tell we hadn't been there before, and I probably had quite a look on my face. And they said, well, welcome to church. And I said, yeah, we're here for a service, but it looks like you don't have one for a while, so maybe we'll go find another one. And they said, no, we're gonna have a Sunday school, and you need to come to Sunday school. And they like grabbed my arm and pulled us into the church service, okay? And my mom was thrilled because she wasn't having to drag me. These other people were dragging me. So I went to a Sunday school class, and these people were talking about stuff, and they were talking about all kinds of crazy things. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I had signed up to go to one church. I've now been in 3 church buildings, and I'm in some kind of service, but it's not the service I agreed to, and I just wanted to leave. I wanted out. But anyway, after that, the Sunday school was over, we went to a different part of the building and had the main church service, and it was okay. Again, I was at wit's end. I just wanted to leave, but it seemed okay, but I didn't pay attention to anything. Afterwards, I was getting ready to head for the door, but they said, hey, there's a place where we can meet and talk and have fellowship, of which I wanted to do none of that, but my mom did. So she said, we're going to that. So we go to the fellowship place, and people are walking around and talking and having a good time, and I'm miserable. Well, this lady comes up to me, and she grabs my arm, and she says, I haven't seen you here before. And I said, well, that's because I haven't been here before. And she tells me, you're gonna tell me that you're gonna come back. And I said, lady, I'm not gonna tell you that I'm gonna come back. And she grabs my arm even tighter. She didn't let go. She's grabbing it tighter now. And she says, no, you're gonna tell me that you're gonna come back. But after a number of these back and forths, she said, you're not gonna tell me you're gonna come back, are you? And I said, that's what I've been trying to tell you. Lady, I am not telling you that I'm coming back to this. And so she looked at me kind of sideways and she said, tell me you'll think about it. And I said, if it's gonna get you to let go of my arm, which was turning purple at this point, and I was fairly sure I needed medical attention, said, if it'll get you to let go of my arm, I'll tell you I'll think about it. And she let go of my arm. So I left. And I gotta tell you, I didn't think about it. Oh, I gotta back out and tell you one more thing. And that is, I hate snakes. I understand that they do something for the ecosystem. I understand God created them. I've read Genesis. I'm not a fan of snakes. I don't like them. Fast forward about 6 months, and having not thought about it at all, having not been back, my mom had gone back to where she lived. On a Sunday morning, it was the springtime. I had just fertilized my yard, and it had rained, and it was working. So the grass was up quite tall, around my knees. And so I went out to cut my grass on a pretty pleasant Sunday morning. So I made my one little loop, and as I'm coming back for my second loop, I notice about 15 feet away from me, there's a stick that's about 2.5, 3 feet in the one little path that I had mowed. And I said, that's strange. I would have noticed that stick. I would have run over it with the lawnmower. I should have noticed that, but I didn't. And I get a little closer, I'm probably 10 feet away from it, and I noticed the stick's looking at me. I said, well, that's not normal. And I got a little closer, and the stick moved. It wasn't a stick, it was a snake. And when I'm finishing mowing up the yard, I got a voice that's just totally clear in my heart. And it said, if you take care of your heart the way that you take care of your yard, snakes are getting in. You need to go to church right now. I had no idea what to do with it, other than I knew I needed to go to church. And the only place that I could think of was the place with the sign, with the grabby people. But I took a shower, went to church, had a great time, and I knew 2 things. I knew I needed to get prayed for, and I knew I needed to join a home group. And so after the service, a guy with a name tag came up to me and he goes, I haven't seen you here before. And so he grabbed another man who was close to him and brought him over, and he said, this is Josh, explain the story. And they prayed for me, and it was great. And one of the guys took me over to this wall where they had these cards, and he handed me about 4 cards and said, call these people and join a small group. And I said, all right, let's do it. And about 3 weeks later, I was walking up to the church, and I hear a lady behind me, and she goes, it's you! It's you! And I'm kind of, a little bit nervous, and I turn around and hear it again, it's you! And she goes, I knew it was you. Remember the lady who kept grabbing my arm? It was her. I realize now that going to church wasn't what I needed. I needed a relationship with God. And the going to church was like a metaphor for and he used the church as the vehicle to build the relationship back, to establish it in my life. I believe I had a pretty good grasp of a belief in God as a child, and I understood a lot of the attributes of God, but I didn't understand how personal that was needed to be for me. So it wasn't as a new revelation and as a new theology. It was more of a revelation of, no, I love you and I'm coming after you. And it was very specific and it was very pointed to me and used the thing that I hate. I hate snakes. God telling me that there are snakes coming into my life, to me, meant that I was going down the path that Adam and Eve had paved for us in separation, in brokenness, in fallen, and not in right relationship with God. And that if I were to let the snakes in, I would be choosing, I was in the middle of choosing self, the world, and the enemy of my soul over the one who wanted to save me. What I like to say to people is I like to tell them that God does leave the 99. God does come after the one because he did it with me. He pursued me specifically, purposefully, intentionally, and met me where I was in the way that I could receive it. I'm very much a work in progress, but what I was a selfish, self-interested, controlling person who only cared about myself and what would make my life the easiest, the most pleasurable, the simplest, the least amount of complicated. What God's activity in my life is still a work in progress, but it is taking me from that state to someone who has surrendered their life to his control, and that I want to be his instrument in connecting other people and loving other people and putting others' needs over my own needs. And I'm a work in progress. We are not there yet, and I probably will not be there on this side of the dirt.